As the flames of Mary's Catholic passions enveloped England, news of her burnings travelled across Europe to the ears of a man in exile. A man whose work would help ensure the future fate of both Tyndale and Cranmer's works.
His name was John Foxe, and although today he's largely forgotten, his work, the Book of Martyrs, would transform England. It so savagely turned the country against Catholicism that just over a century after it was published, laws were passed which ensured that no English monarch was allowed to be Catholic again.
Foxe had been an Oxford Don, but he was caught up with the ideas of the Reformation and forced to leave the university.
When Mary came to the throne, Foxe knew he was in danger, so he and his heavily pregnant wife fled for the continent.
And it was here in Basel where the seeds for his revolutionary work were sown. The city was a safe Protestant stronghold in a continent still largely under Catholic control. And Foxe, penniless and full of zeal for the new faith, became a proofreader for a famous printer, Johannes Operinus. Operinus's printing house still exists, and it was in these rooms that John Foxe's imagination was fired by ideas that would become the foundation for his magnum opus.
Operinus's printing press was publishing the most important books by Reformer scholars, so Foxe found himself at the heart of a secret and sophisticated network of Protestants from across the continent. They were risking their lives to smuggle out heretical documents, letters from reformers in prison, and news of the latest executions.
It was an atmosphere of dangerous innovation.
One of the most popular types of books being printed were martyrologies. These were gruesome accounts of those brutally killed for their faith throughout history.
These Protestant martyrologies addressed the most difficult intellectual challenge the reformers faced as they fought for their survival in Catholic Europe.
The problem for Foxe and the other Protestant visionaries around him was that those being killed were not seen as heroes or martyrs in Catholic England, but as heretics, as political dissidents, so dangerously wrong in their beliefs that they were jeopardising not only their own souls, but the spiritual health of the nation.
Foxe and the reformers knew that in order for Protestantism to win out in England, they had to prove that far from being radical heretics, these men were in fact the true church, and that it was Catholicism which had perverted the Christian message and was leading people astray.
Foxe's task to prove this was nothing less than a rewriting of 1,000 years of English history, showing how her millennium as a Catholic country was a heretical aberration, and how her people now had the chance to reject this false faith and embrace the true church.
And in 1558, Foxe finally saw his opportunity with the death of Mary Tudor, leaving Anne Boleyn's daughter, Elizabeth, as her heir. Elizabeth was Protestant. It was the moment Foxe had been waiting for.
It was a chance for a martyrology he would produce to influence the thinking not just of a queen, but of an entire nation.
Now he just had to turn his vision into a reality. In 1559, Foxe returned to England with a mission to write a martyrology in English of Protestants who'd suffered under the Catholic Church, from early Christianity to the reigns of the Tudors. And within weeks of arriving in London, he met the man who would help him make his book one of the most popular in English history, the publisher John Day, a passionate reformer and with a genius for PR.
A work of such enormous scale was a huge financial risk for him, but he immediately saw the potential of Foxe's ambitious plans to turn the lives of their friends and fellow reformers burnt as heretics into tales of religious heroism.
From the minute Foxe set foot back on English soil, he and Day raced to complete the work as soon as it was physically possible. 18 months later, the first edition was finally finished. It was the most complicated and technically demanding book ever printed in England, and in its fullest manifestation was 6 times the length of the Bible. And I've come to Foxe's old Oxford College, Magdalen, to see it.
So exciting to see this particular book. It's huge.
It is. This is the first English edition of John Foxe's Acts and Monuments, otherwise known as the Book of Martyrs. Not only that, it's the copy that John Foxe dedicated and gave to Magdalen College, Oxford. And then we can see down at the bottom John Foxe's signature.
The book was full of Foxe's detailed accounts of the deaths of Protestants. But what made it an instant success was a rather more tabloid idea of Day's. In a masterstroke, he took the financial risk of funding woodcuts of the martyrs being killed in ingenious ways, ensuring that an even largely illiterate population would understand the message they were trying to convey.
So this particular one, what's that showing?
So this is 3 women who were burned at the stake in Guernsey, and what you can't help but see is that the lady in the middle is giving birth to a child.
Yeah, there's a child flying out of her ripped abdomen.
This is Peregrine Massey with her mother and her sister. Long story short, they're charged with heresy and therefore burned at the stake. But what presumably was not taken into account, because she didn't tell the authorities, Peregrine is pregnant, so she gives birth in the flames. Oh. But as grisly as that is, it gets worse. What happens afterwards is that someone rushes in, grabs that baby to save it. He's then told promptly, throw it back in.
Oh my goodness. So this is really powerful imagery, communicating with illiterate people in a way that visually they can understand.
It tells a story in and of itself. So you see the pained look on the mother's face because she's giving birth at the stake, and that's understandable. But what you get with the other 2, with her mother and her sister, is a very stoic look on their face, and their hands are raised in prayer, indicating that even though they're in the pains of death, these are clearly martyrs because they are not suffering the pains of death. They know they are going to a better place. And so you contrast those faces with people like here, the Catholic authorities, who are quite ugly, and this chap here in particular, you can see he's laughing at what's happening. So what you've got is this juxtaposition of good, godly Protestants and a physical manifestation of the evil within with the Catholics. And that's one of the really innovative things that Foxe and the printer do in this, is that whilst the text is there for those who can read, in many instances you don't have to read. You can read the image. And nobody'd really done that to this extent before, with such graphic pictures.
In fact, the book was far more than a macabre record of Catholic tyranny. It was a profoundly ideological piece of Protestant propaganda. And it's the ornate frontispiece that epitomises what Foxe and Day were trying to prove.
Okay, so here we have the title page. On the left and on the right, you see these opposing images. And what it's setting up right from the beginning is, these are the Protestants, these are the true church, these are the Catholics, these are the false church. So what's happening? Bottom on the right, we have a preacher preaching to a not very captivated group of people, it has to be said. Not a book in sight. It's about rosaries, it's about processions, and it's about a priest who is thinking more about himself than preaching to his flock. And just sneaking into the shot there is a little devil with his tongue out and his hand ready to clutch those souls. Because it then moves into a more sinister image. We have, again, quite ugly men kneeling, and the priest here is elevating the host, and so they are representing transubstantiation here. They are representing that moment when body and blood are a real thing, not a memorial, as the Protestants would have said. Right above them, that elevated host moves into some more devils who are clutching souls, and they are looking in distress, clearly because they are not saved. Put that in comparison to the left. We have a very handsome preacher with a fine beard. Everybody looks riveted in what he's saying, and some appear to be following. They're following in books. Very Protestant image. And we move from that straight up to watch those martyrs at the stake. Yep. There's a direct correlation between the two. If you go to goodly preaching, and if you are burned at the stake as a heretic, you're not, because you are going to go and join these people up here with their beautiful crowns and their trumpets, and clearly representing those souls who have been saved. Foxe is literally rewriting history at this moment, saying the Protestants aren't the heretics, the Protestants are the saved.
Foxe had visualised a new ideology. Now he just needed it to spread. But for that, he had to secure the backing of the Queen. 7 years after the first edition, Foxe and Day launched a new version of the Book of Martyrs. One that would make it a household name. It was more comprehensive, with 3 times as many woodcuts. And Day again had a stroke of genius to make exclusive gift copies for influential members of the Elizabethan regime.
This one belonged to Queen Elizabeth's Archbishop, Matthew Parker. What makes it so exceptional is that every single image has been individually hand-painted.
In this epic, the new Queen and her advisors saw a unique opportunity, a work that had the potential to persuade the entire nation to reject Catholicism once and for all.
It was a gift that didn't go unrewarded. In 1570, the Queen's Privy Council ordered the Archbishops of York, Canterbury and London to acquire copies of Foxe that could be distributed to parish churches across the country.
The Book of Martyrs was to act as a Protestant warning against the tyranny and barbarism of Catholics, and persuade a people worn down by decades of religious conflict to accept a Protestant rule. And it worked. Foxe was an instant success.
It's easy to see why this book was so persuasive. The woodcuts are utterly compelling, and the images even circulated on their own. They were displayed in taverns and in people's homes. It's no surprise that in its wake, anti-Catholicism became one of the defining traits of the English, a people who were once utterly devoted to Rome.
Within a generation, Catholicism had been transformed from being the only religion in England to being the work of the devil. As the Book of Martyrs was chained to lecterns across England, it joined the English Bible and the reintroduced Book of Common Prayer. In 1559, Elizabeth had approved a revised version of Cranmer's liturgy, overturning Mary's ban. Now, the once most controversial books in England formed the backbone of English lives. Foxe lived until old age and would see 4 editions of his work in his lifetime alone. And it was in his pages the reputations of Tyndale and Cranmer were redeemed.
The humiliating deaths of the authors of these 2 incredible pieces of literature are among those that are most celebrated in Foxe's Book of Martyrs. He reinvents them. They're not heretics anymore. Now they're religious pioneers.
But there was a high price for their redemption: Foxe's demonisation of all Catholics. ensuring that for the next 300 years they were excluded from all positions of power, fined if they refused to worship in Protestant churches, and often treated with utmost suspicion. These works have a mixed legacy: the liberation of the Word of God, the democratization of Christianity, the cost, religious intolerance. But you can't help but stand in awe at how 3 books were able to so entirely change the soul of a nation within just decades.
From this moment, it was William Tyndale's New Testament that the people of England heard every Sunday. It was Cranmer's Book of Common Prayer that would echo in their ears from their very first breath to their last. And it was Foxe's Book of Martyrs that would act as a constant reminder of the terrible fate that would befall them if they gave up these hard-won beliefs and returned to England's bloody Catholic past.